it's like more and more and more and more, I wind up in these situations where my Virgo South Node, my, sense of obligation, my sense of duty does not match what my intuition is asking me to do. And how do you reconcile that? And like, I want to just, for all of us, myself first and foremost, but anybody who's listening to this, I want to wrap us all in this big blanket, this big, like, God love blanket of compassion and soothing that says, like, everything that you are, like, even the painful parts, like, it's so exactly what it needs to be. And like, how beautiful of like a signpost of new territory that you're even having these dilemmas of my intuition and my old programming self, like, they don't agree. Like, can you think back to a time in your life where there was no disagreement simply because there was no intuitive self, there was only programming? Hello out there to anyone who is interested in diving back into this Pisces North Node contemplation with me as a Pisces North Node. And I know there are lots of you around my channel, or 12th house North Nodes even. As I personally walk this path, kind of just for the duration of my whole life, right? That is something that I would love to get to share with you guys. So yes, for the collective, kind of everybody will be tapping into this contemplation as we have that going on from like January 2025 through July of 2026. So it's still a ways off for the collective. But for those of us that are on that path all day, every day, hey, how's it going? I have a scenario that I want to share with you, and I want to paint a picture, and I want to hear from my Virgo South nodes, my 6th house South nodes, how closely this resonates to like what you got going on, So the scenario is this. Basically procrastination. Like procrastinating something because I really just like do not feel like doing this. And then because I don't feel like doing it, it doesn't take very long before the anxiety kicks up, like the choir of anxiety that's like, you should be doing that. And I'm like, but I don't feel like it. You should be doing that. But I still don't feel like it. You should be doing that. And it's like, a couple of things that I want to wrap around this. Number one is, back in the day on my Virgo South Node journey, I was such a compulsive workaholic that I would not have known what you were talking about with any of that, because I compulsively workaholic, like easily 60 hours a week and 70 or 80 was not uncommon, as far as like go to work for 8 or 9 or 10 hours and then come home and sit on the couch for 4 or 5 hours and like do all the things. And so if there was a deadline, if there was a, I had a lot of respect for the deadline back in that phase, okay, back in my compulsive workaholic phase. And now in this phase where to give you context, for 7 years, I have been practicing following my emotions. And I've called it many things, like starting with the law of attraction back in the first part, where basically like what you put out is what you get back. And so following that feeling on the inside, and I started to recognize the compulsiveness of my workaholic patterns at that point and how shitty it felt. Didn't feel good on the inside, and then I wasn't liking what was happening on the outside. I was like, well, I guess that makes sense, doesn't it? So that had me like really pull back from doing things that didn't feel good to me. And in that evolution, at this point, I say I value my intuition. I value what my intuition is guiding me to do, because I know that that's going to put me at the right place at the right time. And the thing about that is that I've seen that play out. I've seen my intuition put me at the right place at the right time over and over and over. It's been 7 years. Like, I've had a lot of time to experiment with that, and I see that it works. And then I get into this same situation over and over. It seems like I'm just always in one of these. It's wild. Like by the time I resolve this one, there'll just be another one. Like that's why I think it's such a Virgo South Node type pattern of like really battling with the compulsion to fulfill your role, the compulsion to like go above and beyond in how you're fulfilling your role, the compulsion to be a perfectionist with how you are fulfilling your role. Like that is my posture. That's my, I mean, I have a Virgo South Node in the 6th house. So like double dose of, that is my posture from past lives, is to do the job, be the job, live, breathe, eat, sleep, the job. Like that's who I am. That's what I am for. That is the purpose of my human, is the job that I'm here to do. And so basically what I've done these last 7 years is carve out space for my sense of self to exist, like to have a self that is nothing to do with the job. That I do live, breathe, eat, sleep because that's my natural posture, like my work. But, starting 7 years ago, there was like a small little tiny space that didn't have anything to do with work. It was just about wanting to feel good on the inside. And that began something of like that space for where it was just myself and it had nothing to do with work. Like that just got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And now at this point, I mean, where I'm at right now is that there is work that needs to be done, like income producing tasks. Like there's a transaction where like there's money being traded for my time. And I have not been able to bring myself to touch this work since like May or June, and it's September. So like 3 or 4 months, like I just don't feel like it. My value is my intuition. I will not be a slave to my role and the deadline. And so then I go, okay, well, I don't feel like doing it today. No big deal. And then tomorrow, I don't feel like doing that today. And then tomorrow, I don't feel like doing that today. And now it's been a week. And I'm like, well, that's not so bad. And then it's been 2 weeks and it's time to submit payroll. And I'm like, ooh, this time is really starting to add up. But you know what? I still don't feel like doing that. And it just goes on and on and on. And then it's been a month. And then it's been 2 months. And then it's been 3 months. And, it's just like, when is it going to happen? And the level of anxiety, it just goes up and up and up and up and up as far as you should be doing that. Like you need to get that job done. You need to get the work done. Like your reputation is depending on it. That's a little my Capricorn thrown in there. Like you need to do this. Like this is your duty. This is your job. Like you're really dropping the ball here. And like, it's like, I am that Virgo South Node, like, they talk about like micromanaging and really nitpicking details and how frustrating that is for that to be directed outwards towards other people. But like, I want to just like wrap each and every one of you in the compassion of like, if you're a Virgo South Node, if you're a 6th house South Node, like, yeah, like it sucks to direct that kind of nitpicky energy at other people, but like try living inside of it, right? Like that's how you treat yourself 24/7. And breaking that habit of like being the micromanager of your person, because your person is only for work, your person is only for your job. And so your sense of self, your ego is like micromanaging your person and like, get back to work, get back to work, get back to work. You should be doing that. You should be doing that. And it's like that Pisces North Node is about really shedding the definition you have of yourself as far as like, I am my job. I am like, for example, like I am a doctor, or I am a grocery store owner, or I am a whatever. Like that is not who you are. That's not what you are. You are God in human form. That's what the Pisces North Node says is like, you are here to merge with and experience and funnel onto the planet universal love, unconditional God love that says, I don't care what you did. I don't care what you do. I love you. I love you exactly as you are. exactly as you are right now, every single piece of your baggage intact, exactly as it is right now. And I love you so freaking much. Like, I've never loved anything more. Receiving that, that's your job. Being a receiver of God's love for you and the all. That's what you are. That's what the Pisces North Node theory is laying out as an option on the buffet. And what I'm painting as far as this contemplation is like, just because that option is on the buffet, and let's say you even take a scoop of that option and you put it on your plate and you have it, that doesn't mean that like lifetimes of practicing it this way just automatically goes away. And so withstanding the anxiety of leaving the safety of our South Node, foregoing the comfort and the security that comes from doing it the way we've always done it. Doing it a new way is scary. And that's what my voice is telling me is like, you know, they're going to be mad at you. They're not going to work with you anymore. They're going to fire you. They're going to tell other people. Like, I mean, I have all of these scenarios of like, what's going to go wrong. And I keep giving them to myself. That micromanager keeps giving them to me like, see, this is why you should get back to work. And I keep having to tell that part of myself, you're not going to bully me through fear. I am a living example of what it looks like to allow my intuition to pull me in divine timing to exactly where I need to be. You're not going to bully me through fear. I'm not buying it anymore, but that doesn't mean that that part of me isn't still like knocking on my forehead, like trying to sell me this stuff, trying to sell me like, you should be told you back to work. Like, just freaking anxious. And so that part of me, that anxious part of me, that's the part of me where it's like very much in shadow. And that's something I've learned that isn't necessarily specific to Virgo Pisces, but like essentially, I think it's a little bit maybe 12th house part as far as like fear and the things that are unseen simply because we are not willing to see them. It's not that they're mystical or illusory. It's like we are closing our eyes. We are sticking our head in the sand and refusing to see it. And that's why it's unseen, is because of our fear. Our fear is the illusion that things remain unseen and mysterious and whatever. So you can like pop that illusion. You can like shatter that fantasy that it's unseen, and you can get right to the bottom of whatever you want. You just got to look it in the face. And so that was what I did this morning. And like big picture, I have a practice where in my journal, at the beginning of each day, I write like the day, the date, all that, and then the mantra for the year that I've selected. And so 2023 is the year of spiritual support. And I had already been writing letters with my God, my spiritual support team, whatever you want to call it. Last year in 2022, I started that practice and was doing it kind of sporadically, but I mean, it was getting really like inner peace, like really good relaxation vibes coming out of that practice. And so I wanted to make it like a daily focus to turn towards my spiritual support and say, what would you have me know at this time? And then just see what comes through. And we write these letters back and forth. And so today was no different. And they're telling me that, you know, you're doing great. Awesome. Keep it up. And I have this anxiety inside of me that's like, excuse me, Mr. God, I don't think everything is okay. Can you talk to me about that? Do you have a moment? Of course we have a moment. And so I say, will you please give me some guidance around this work that I'm having a hard time fulfilling my duties. And they responded, why do you think you don't do it? I said, well, it's not drawing me to it. I've practiced allowing my intuition to guide me and my timing, and I haven't felt at all like touching it. And so they respond, what makes you think you need to do it then? Such a great question. Thank you so much. And I say, well, my superior will be back from maternity leave soon. This hiatus that I have taken has very much been in the shadow of the hiatus that the person who was like leading the project, like she wasn't working and so I wasn't working. Not necessarily on purpose. I definitely didn't plan it like that, but the incentive to return to work as far as like, oh, well, I'm going to have a meeting with her and I need to update her. So here, let me get ready for that. Like that wasn't a thing. And then there was nothing else like pulling me into the work. And I was like, she'll be back soon. And I've been getting paid and not working. I'm worried about getting in trouble or no longer having a good relationship with this work, with like the people, the team, the group that I'm working with. And then this question like really blew my mind. They responded, why do you think you need a good relationship with them? Well, that's interesting. And I say, I mean, very honestly, they have been a primary source of my income these last 3 years since stepping back from my business, managing my business. I think I'm anxious to protect my reputation with them, to protect my livelihood, my ability to work with them, my ability to make money through them. So again, though, it comes back to valuing money and security, which is a very Earth South Node kind of business. But very much on the other hand, my conscious, heart-centered values have my intuition above money. And I recently retired on the belief of God being my provider. That it is not a matter of my work, it's a matter of receiving. And that instantly calmed me, which that's not their guidance, that's me pulling at my own understanding that I already had, that I had just kind of forgotten about for the moment and like pulled it back into view. Thank you so much for the question. Why do you think you need a good relationship with them? And realizing that like I'm anxious because what if they no longer will provide for me? Like what if I'm no longer worthy of them hiring me and paying me for my skills and my services? Like what if, oh my God, like, and then to remember like, I mean, I had that shift, that belief shift of like, no, I'm here to receive, that like my intuition will put me at the right place, the right time to receive every single thing that I need. That there's already plenty of avenues open and new avenues like coming into focus all the time for me to be able to receive whatever it is that I need to survive. My survival does not depend on them still liking me. And this honestly has a little bit of like the Libra South Node tied in with that Virgo South Node of like feeling like your work is your survival. And it is very much like sixth house, especially Virgo as well, like the shadow side of like servant mentality or like being of service, which is one of the gifts of Virgo energy. But the shadow of that is slave energy, is like you don't have a sense of self. You exist to work. That's all. We maintain your human so that you can work. That's all. And that mentality, that slave consciousness, like, I mean, this is not to minimize like anybody else's experience, by the way, but like psychologically, like I have been enslaved to my own micromanager my whole entire life. And still, like that micromanager is like riding shotgun, and I happen to have another passenger now called my intuition, and them trying to figure out like who's gonna get to decide like which way we turn the wheel. And like, I mean, it can be so freaking frustrating. But at the same time, this is the process of North Node, South Node. This is the process of the most dominant part of who you are squaring off, heading off with the most not dominant, the smallest, the most insignificant part of who you are. And so really growing into our North Node is challenging. it's challenging, and it will constantly feel like putting to the side possibly really intense levels of anxiety, and being able to do that or not, like sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not. And that's where the concept of like a 1-degree turn can be really helpful with, like what can you do? Because setting to the side your anxiety about, no, you should be doing it this way, like our job is our survival, like that is a really deeply ingrained belief in me personally. And setting that to the side, like, no, you get out of the car, we're good, we're just gonna go on for, like, no, it doesn't work like that. Like that guy, he's tasked himself with my survival, and he's taking his job very seriously. So that's the level of fight he's putting up, as I'm like, I don't feel like it, like on the inside, it feels like, like, what do you mean you don't feel like it? It's been a whole week. You haven't even touched it. I'm like, well, you're really not going to like that. I don't even think it's on the horizon. Like I see this being like several months. It's shaping up to be a long one, Get comfortable. No, there's no getting comfortable for the anxiety of the South Node. Like, so the 1-degree turn of like, how could you set aside like 1% of the anxiety? How could you get yourself 1% more comfortable with this concept? And having this conversation with my spiritual support of like, please give me guidance. And then them basically interviewing me to pull out my own guidance. Thank you so much. Right? So how perfect is this? I wasn't even looking ahead. It's like, that is not, okay, so the end of my last response was, I recently retired on the belief that God is my provider, that it is not a matter of my work, it's a matter of receiving. And so then they asked me, how could you be receiving 1% more? And the first thing that came to mind was something I hadn't thought about, which was when this group hired me, my boss told me, she's like, I know the hourly rate is way too low. Like, I feel so bad that we're not able to give you what you deserve. And so because of that, even though we're going to pay you in hours, we're really just looking for the project to be completed. So get the work done, and that's really all we care about. And so like that was the understanding that we had. And so that was what came back to me, was like, the work has gotten done. Like the phase of the project that we're in right now, like it's not like people are waiting on me in this exact moment. Like there is a deadline coming up at the end of October, but that's like, again, like 2 months from now. So this anxiety that I've been carrying about I should be doing it, it's like, where is that even coming from? Because the work itself isn't calling me. The deadline isn't even urgent. It's just my generalized anxiety around not working. Like that, I feel like, is one of the hallmarks of a Virgo South Node consciousness, is when you take time off, you feel anxious. You're not comfortable in peace and stillness and silence. Like you're traumatically in the posture of responding, like working, like any amount of time where it's not all about work. It's like living with that anxiety telling you to get back to work. That is the headwind through which we have to push if we want to get to the other side of that Pisces North Node of trusting our intuition and allowing it to guide us. Sometimes, like, best case scenario is that we do have, experiences with our intuition that show us, here's what it feels like when the message is to go do the thing right now. And I go and I do the thing right now, and then it's like amazing. And those continue to happen even in the last few months. Like my intuition, while it hasn't been calling me over here, it was calling me in these other places. And I went there and it was beautiful. And so like, yes, like having that experience is so helpful for basically being able to calm your body while this anxiety is raging of like, you should be getting back to work. Like, you are wasting all this time. Like, you're burning daylight. You could be so productive. Like, you could be helping them. You could be adding to this. You could be running that report. Like, you could be on and on and on and on and on, feeding me with all the things that I could do. But none of that like mental anxiety is my intuition and the sensation in my body that's like, ooh, you know what I want to do? I want to go do the thing. And like, just like, you just got to go. Like, you just got to go right now because it's the funnest thing you ever thought of. And I know that feeling. And so in the absence of that feeling, being able to know it is what kind of helps me to soothe my body kind of 1% more. How could I let go of this anxiety 1% more? I could take a deep breath and I can remember that, you know, my intuition is going to call me there in the perfect time. And that, ooh, this is another really good one as far as how could you be receiving 1% more. Another one that I really love is I was spared. I've been spared. You know, like, if your intuition leads you and someone blows up, someone gets mad, someone cannot handle the fact that you have stepped back from your duties and they are now lashing out, they're now like wanting to, you know, harm you in some way, you've been spared. You absolutely needed to, you know, see their true colors so that you could move on to something that was more heart-centered and more trading and exchanging love for love. That person didn't love you. They loved the function that you provided for them. And better to know now than to just continue to live inside this like constant obligation. Like the first time I ever hibernated for months at a time, it was like the anxiety that I've been feeling these last few months of not working is like this big compared to, oh my God, like that summer of 2021, or I guess it was more like the spring. It was April through like mid-July of 2021. And I've, you know, like I said, I've been practicing for years of, I do what I feel like doing. I listen to my intuition, and when it calls me into something, I go there. And it was like, you know, or basically I was already feeling really run down, and like a couple days before it happened, I was like, I cleaned up my bedroom really nice and I put plants in there for the first time. I like got my bedroom plants and I got some bathroom plants, and like it was so nice, and I cleaned it up and I was like, oh, this is like a space worthy of a queen, and I am a queen, and I sit on my bed and I'm like, oh, I love this so much. 2 days later, my grandma passes away, and I didn't cry so much then, but like it was like, I mean, like, I'm sure everyone has seen the images of like the atomic bomb going off and like the mushroom cloud of like, I wasn't even that close to her necessarily, and hearing that she had died, it was like this force like went down into the depths of me and landed, and the mushroom cloud that got stirred up was just too much to see through. I felt numb. I felt like my conscious faculties were completely offline in the dust. It was like all my mechanisms were ineffective against the haze that was now in my experience. Like that's all there was this haze. And so that was April 1st, 2021. And I was like, I just need to lay down. And I laid down and I binged Netflix and slept and whatever that whole day. And basically the next day I felt like I, woke up in the morning and I made coffee and I went and got back in my bed and was like, you know what? Another bed day. That's what I need, is another bed day. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's good. And at that time, like I was really indulging myself because of my grandma passing away and my numbness that was kind of scaring me. I was like, in some ways, I wish I would have just like freaked the fuck out, because this numbness was like, when is this gonna erupt? Like what is this? And it continued on. And it was April 1st through, it was like July 20th when I finally like moved back into my office, which is what this room is, and like kind of, got out of bed. I spent like 3 months every day. What do you feel like doing today? I feel like getting back in my bed. I don't want to do anything. I just want to be in my bed. I just want to lay back down. I want to get back under the covers. And some may call that depression, and maybe it was, but it didn't feel like that. Honestly, it felt like a process that needed to happen. And consciously, I was not getting to participate in that process. It was this unconscious haze of a mushroom cloud that, like, I mean, I've tried at times to explain like what was going on, like as far as what I could feel and what my dreams were telling me and what my intuition was telling me and what was coming through in the journaling. Like, it was the best, like the succinctest way I could probably put it is like I was accepting. It was like a ceremony to accept my grandmother into my spiritual support. Like, I received her soul. I received her energy, and it like knitted itself into the existing bubble of protection that was like already around me. But it was like this massive, massive upgrade. It was like everything she was. It was like she gave herself to me, was what it felt like. And I don't know. Doesn't matter. And then it was just over. It was like, that's done. And it was like the fog, like the dust had like settled back down, and like some things had reconfigured themselves. And the biggest one was my self-trust was like through the roof, because it ended, right? Like, I did indulge myself and I gave myself that hibernation for over 3 months, almost 4 months. And eventually my intuition called me, and it called me hard. Like, when I came out of that hibernation, it was like July through, it was July and August and the early part of September. I recorded like a podcast episode every day, sometimes two. Like, I had so much to say after laying in my bed for 3 months. So like, that was really cool to see like this eruption of creative energy, like really flowing forth. Like, my clarity was just powerful, and like I had so much to say. And then it was in September of 2021 when I had the courage, and I had like embraced myself on this new level that allowed me to be imperfect on camera. And that's why I was podcasting in the first place, was because I was somewhat comfortable with like just my voice and being able to speak and maintain coherent thought when it was just like my voice and just trying to talk. You'll notice like still when I record, I don't look at the thing. My eyes are like all over the place because I'm trying to stay coherent in my thought process. But it was like that, trusting myself and like giving myself that hibernation, it awakened a level of self-acceptance that I had not reached yet. And I got there by trusting myself to allow myself to hibernate for like 100 some days, and not letting my anxiety of like, you should be doing this differently. Like, I just was like, you know what, maybe maybe I should be doing this differently. But you know what, right now I don't have the faculties to do it differently. And that was the gift that my grandmother's passing had given me, was like, she took my mental faculties offline for a few months while spiritually I got up to speed with this upgraded version of my spiritual support. And once I had them online, I mean, it was like, why can't you go on video? Well, I might mess it up. Who says that that's not actually the perfect way? Who says that that's even messing it up? How do you know that you should be doing it differently? What if your intuition and even your misspeaking and, losing your train of thought and picking it up in a different place, like, who says that that's not exactly what's needed? And that level of self-acceptance and that space and grace had never been there for me before. And that is what allowed me to start my own content challenge, where I was trying to post a video to my YouTube channel every day. I wasn't recording every day. Like the first time I sat and recorded, it was so fun. I was out there for like I was on my front porch for like 3 or 4 hours, and it was a beautiful fall morning, and I had my coffee, and it was just so fun to get to tell these stories, whatever came up. And it was like I recorded like 6 or 7 different things that first day. And so it's like, look, I can record like once a week and have all this content. Like I don't have to, one of the pieces that I have always been worried about with my content is like I'm so inconsistent, and I start something and then I drop off of it and whatever. And I'm like, okay, but if you had an umbrella where it was open-ended enough that you could jump around, and that's totally fine. You can do whatever you want. And you have a structure where you do not have to even be in the mood to do this like all day, every day. You could sit in one sitting and get like kind of harvest all of this content and then have it for the channel and like release it over however much time you want. And all of that, like, again, like that had never been available to me, like that level of fluidity, and building it for me, building it so that it was built like for my size and my natural ways, and that like those natural ways were just fine. Maybe that's exactly what's needed. So it said that a lot to me in those days. And so I did that. I had like 80 some days of every single day a video came out on my channel. I also had no video editing skills at that point. So like it was building up that skill set. It was building up like kind of getting used to being on camera and getting comfortable telling my story while I was on video as well. And that's what led to making videos, was this level of self-acceptance and grace. And you are perfect exactly as you are. Like you don't have to fulfill some duty or role or obligation that you have in your head. You don't have to. And that's not to say that you're wrong or bad for having that in your head, right? Like that's where, we do always, I'm a big fan of, it's not about amputating that south node. It's not about like murdering that anxiety part of ourselves. It's about realizing like, who is that? Who is that that's talking? Right? Like what part of me is saying these things? And it's the part of me that is that primal part of like worried about my personal survival. It's like my self-protective instinct to find security in the way that I know how to, the way that I best know how to. Like that's my best route to security. Like I've had a job since I was like 8 years old, working for my parents illegally, getting paid in cash under the table. Like I've just always known that like, if I need money, if I need resources, I'll just get a job. Like it's not hard to get a job. It's really not. It's just a matter of how far are you willing to settle, like what are you willing to settle for? And so like that is my go-to move for how to find security. But this last year of, really tuning in to my spiritual support, these last 7 years of learning to listen to and trust my intuition, it's like more and more and more and more, I wind up in these situations where my Virgo South Node, my, sense of obligation, my sense of duty does not match what my intuition is asking me to do. And how do you reconcile that? And like, I want to just, for all of us, myself first and foremost, but anybody who's listening to this, I want to wrap us all in this big blanket, this big like God love blanket of compassion and soothing that says like everything that you are, like even the painful parts, like it's so exactly what it needs to be. And like how beautiful of like a signpost of new territory that you're even having these dilemmas of my intuition and my old programming self, like they don't agree. Like, can you think back to a time in your life where there was no disagreement simply because there was no intuitive self? There was only programming, there was only workaholic, there was only like giving your entire being over to your survival, like your contribution to the tribe. Like, I mean, in my opinion, I would much rather suffer through this conflict of selves than to be trapped and a victim of my old workaholic programming. So it's like, yeah, maybe it's not all the way to ideal yet. Maybe it's not, exactly perfect. That Virgo South Node will always and forever want things to be perfect. It's like you can get better and better and better and better and better. And again, that's where that 1 degree, 1% more concept really serves us when it comes back to the South Node and moving into our North Node literally 1 millimeter at a time. Because if you're doing it right, it should be making you very uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. And so anybody who is in that space of, you know what, I see my shadow patterns and I'm not going to let myself operate on autopilot in that space anymore. I am going to consciously direct myself. I'm going to consciously choose something different. And now I'm really uncomfortable because what I want to choose does not, my programming self is not a fan. And for anybody who's in that boat, I just want to give you like the biggest hug and be like, good job at even having that dilemma inside of yourself. And the part that I want to lay down that's like the realist in me, the practical part of me, the part that's like, but how does it really work? And like, what can we really expect? Like, what's realistic? Like that part of me is like, I don't know if that dilemma ever really goes away. Like, I think the whole point of like the South Node is the most over exaggerated part of ourselves and the North Node is the least developed. I mean, in one lifetime, do you believe that it's possible to get those to be 100% balanced to where, your North Node energy is as dominant as your South Node energy? Maybe it completely depends on each individual's wiring. Like, for example, I have Mars conjunct my North Node. So Mars in Pisces in the 12th house, exactly on top of the North Node in Pisces in the 12th house. And in some ways, I feel like I've been kind of living this Pisces way my whole life, just very unconsciously, just like not really letting it be the end all be all. It maybe pointed me in the right direction, but then typically my Virgo self still had to analyze it, still had to make a plan, still had to like work out a backup plan in case this thing didn't work out. Like, I still let my analytical side run my life, even though all that energy in my 12th house, like I was still very intuitive, just not really calling it that, not really understanding that that's what I was doing. So I would imagine that it probably depends on the individual as far as how balanced you can become in one lifetime. But I do believe that, our South Node is with us for our whole life. We have our chart for our whole life. So probably on the incremental, we could 1% more, 1% more, 1% more, 1% more, heal that Virgo shadow of perfectionism and obligation and slave consciousness. We can heal that 1% more by exposing ourselves to 1% more of God's love and acceptance of us, a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. So like, I think best case scenario is that, where does higher levels of God's love come from? Like, in terms of not in general, but for you specifically, like, how do we personally open up to higher levels of God's love? I think that's where the Virgo shadow is doing its job. The Virgo shadow overloads and overwhelms us with how imperfect it is, how far out of grasp perfection really is. And in the gap of that, it's like you have a choice. And that choice is insanity. For real, I mean that. You can drive yourself fucking insane trying to make it perfect, you can almost like kill yourself physically trying to make it perfect because you just can't get there. But like you can give more and more and more of yourself to it. Nobody's going to stop you from doing that. Been there many times. I call that running yourself off the cliff, to where you crash, because then like, something steps into where you physically can no longer do it. And that's, that's source, like cutting us off from what wasn't working anyway. But it's in that gap between what we know is true in the world, like how imperfect it is, and how perfect we wish it was. Like it's in that gap that we will either become insane or we will surrender. We will open to the divine, because in the divine is all the perfection we're ever reaching for. In the divine is all the security we're ever hoping to gain by doing it perfectly in the physical. Right? Like if you've ever tugged on that thread of perfectionism and like, where is that coming from? Like it's a deep insecurity. It's like, I have to do it perfect enough because people's lives depend on it. Sometimes mine, sometimes other people's. And so it's like a life and death situation to be perfect. And in this lifetime as a Pisces North Node, it's like perfection will always, always be kept out of reach of you, because we have to have this gap where either it will drive you insane, which eventually the insanity, I think, kind of cracks itself open to allow some of the divine to come in. But we can also go there rather than do the insane thing. We can surrender as soon as we recognize the angst of us trying to force it to be perfect. We can follow that thread of, why am I trying to make this perfect? Why do I hold myself to this standard? And it's like, well, because if I don't, I'm worried that this bad thing will happen and this bad thing will happen and this bad thing will happen. Like I'm trying to keep myself safe by being perfect enough. And that's where at any time we can surrender into God is our provider. God loves us no matter what we do, no matter how imperfect we are. Like it is not a life and death situation to be perfect in the physical. In fact, it's not even possible to be perfect in the physical. Like we can surrender, we can use our tools, we can take that route. We can let ourselves receive the security that we as humans in this physical realm will never be able to create for ourselves. We can't create it with our own two hands. We can emulate it, we can get close to it, we can try to create it in the physical, but the idea of security and being merged with safety is a non-physical concept, because the world is inherently unsafe. Like it's not even possible to survive life. Like it's a very unsafe concept to like be born and be alive. So yeah, like it's not possible to find 100% safety and security in the 3D realm. It only exists as an abstract non-physical concept in the 5D. So at any time, like if you find yourself in the angst of wanting that level of security, you can surrender to your own divinity and find it right where it is, at the root of your own soul, where Creator is, sending us all forward, where source energy is kind of that fabric that we've all sprang forth from, in the interconnectedness of the all, the soul to soul connection between all beings in all timelines. Like that's where true security lives. And we can each access it anytime we want, but it does require stop trying to create it in the physical. You can't be actively creating it in the physical and receiving it from where it really is all at the same time. And so the angst, the option where we become insane, like that is, we never let go of believing that we are in control. We are in control, we are in control, we are in control, until we crash off the cliff. And our option to be in control is stripped away from us because we never really had it anyway. So at any point, we can shift into a different way of being, where we are no longer trying to be in control of ourselves or anything else. We are simply receiving what is. We are allowing our intuition to guide us into the right place at the right time. And all of these things are so easy for me to say. And I hope the first part of the video did a good job of like painting a realistic portrait, especially for my Virgo South nodes, of like warts and all. Like even though these are beautiful ideas and it does relax me while I physically, like, mentally hold myself, like, in this place of understanding, like, I feel so good. And there are moments where I forget that I know any of this and I still am like, how am I gonna do it? How am I gonna, like, this is one more little story and then I'll sign off here. It was just yesterday where, again, I was in this angst of trying to figure it out, trying to, like, really, like, make a plan and, like, what's the best strategy and how am I going to do it, and I should do this and then I should do this and I'll do these 3 days apart because blah, 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 blah. Like, Carly, love you so much. It's that level of planning that lets me know how much I care. That's like one side of that Virgo South node. It's like, I wouldn't be fighting this hard to make it perfect if I didn't give a fuck. I want it to be so good. God, I want it to be so good. And it's like, when I really want something to be good, that's when I get, in my own way, the worst. So this story yesterday was so perfect. It was like, I, like, really started to notice, like, my hunched and my tension and, like, my angstiness of, like, needing to figure it out. And then I was like, you know what? I'll ask my spiritual support. Like, what a brilliant idea. Maybe they have some guidance for me. It's like, that's always, like, a brand new idea. Like, I'm still so new to it that it's just still, like, not a habit at all. Like, I'll spin in the angst for quite a while before I remember, like, ooh, maybe they can help me. And so anyways, I wrote down a question. Like, I wasn't going to get it from him in my journal. I was going to get it from him in meditation. And I wrote down this question of, please guide me to the best approach to launching my new podcast. Please guide me to the best approach to launching my new podcast. And that was a revelation all by itself, because when it first occurred to me to ask them for help, I basically was like, oh, okay, so I'll ask them, you know, if when I do this, if I should leave this on here because of this, this, and this. And, like, it was like the most, like, acutely specific question, because I was already like 1,000,000 miles down the road on the plan. And I had hit this little snag where I couldn't figure out, like, should I do it this way or should I do it this way? And I was going to ask him this teeny little snag question. And then it was like this huge sigh came over me. And it was like, do you see that question is assuming that you should even do this and this? Like, you've already, like, decided all of these things to get you to this little snag. And I understand that you want help with this, but, like, are you sure that all of this was accurate? No. No, I'm not sure that was accurate. So you're right. Let's start over. Let's go back to the beginning. And rather than me trying to contrive through my mind and my strategy and my plan, what is the best way to launch this podcast? Like, I had, you know, all of these decisions, like I was going to do all this, and then I just needed to know about this piece. And so I start over at the beginning. Please guide me to the best approach to launching my podcast. And I start my stopwatch and I go into meditation. And for me, I've never been, like, good at any kind of meditation that I can find. So I, like, made up my own version. And basically, it's like, you close your eyes and you breathe, and whatever happens is perfect. So that happens, you know. It's not like, oh, my mind was cleared and I you know, only had good thoughts. Like, no, like, it's usually a shit show of chaos. But I witness it. I let myself show me what's in there, you know, like, what can you show me? And usually it's a rapid fire succession of crap that some of it makes sense and some of it doesn't. And it all, like, you know, makes me feel some kind of way. And then sometimes I can, like, oh yeah, breathe and just, like, come back. And that's what meditation is. And in the meditation, they didn't answer my question so much as the onslaught of things that were shown to me. It led me to this place where what happened was a visceral feeling of, like, I thought I was going to cry, happy tears. I was so overwhelmed with appreciation for how how beautiful that I even have this podcast, how beautiful that I even know to like ask my spiritual support and then go into a meditation, like how beautiful this life is, and how beautiful that like I let myself live this life. Like I was just so overcome by like, oh my God, like just this day and this moment, and I love it so much. And then on the heels of that, it was like, yeah, like these last 3 years, like ever since August of 2020, like that's when I gave management, we promoted a new store manager for my business. And so I was no longer managing the day-to-day of my business, and somebody else was there responsible for the 7 days a week, 24/7, 365. Like that's on them, not on me. I still have owner responsibilities, but not anything close to what I was dealing with before. And ever since then, like this freedom that I have, and this is all still in the meditation, and it came to like, yeah, these last 3 years are like literally the best of my life. And then this little footnote was like, like these last 3 years are top 5 best years of my entire life, like hands down. And it was that was just this crescendo of like these last 3 years are easily in the best 5 years of my life. And I was like, I need to write that down. And I need to write like why and what, like what is this appreciation? And that led to 1, 2, 3, 4 and a little bit. So 4.5 pages of me writing this. And in the end, what it was the very first post to introduce my podcast. And it was like the most heartfelt, heart-centered way to debut my podcast into the world. And I was correct in my like, are you sure that all this is right? Like, no, like none of that was correct as far as that's how we're going to launch it. It was so much simpler than that. It was like, just be real, just be honest, just be appreciative for your life like you are, and let that kind of like be the one to push the row of dominoes over. Let that be the starting point. And that was so beautiful. It was so easy. It was so unexpected. It was so effortless. It just like poured out of me. And even as I've read it back like multiple times, like I don't even need to edit it. I don't want to edit it. It's like, that's what I want to say. That's exactly what I want to say. Oh my gosh. And it poured right out of me in like 10 minutes. It was like no big deal to let it come through. And I was only in meditation for 5 minutes and 43 seconds. So before this swell of appreciation eventually turned itself into how I should launch my podcast, you know? So letting ourselves receive the love that God has for us, that our own God self has for us, the guidance and the energy and the intuition and the leading us step by step by step that God has for us. Our work is to receive it. And for anyone in this boat with me, I am sending all of my love and self-love for you to borrow if any of it is helpful, as far as this is so much easier said than done. And yet we can lean 1% more in the direction of receiving the love and security and unity that is ours, that belongs to us as extensions of that energy, extensions of that God, right? Like when we find Aries North Node, when we find the root of who we truly are, I believe we find God. And you know, that's just my experience. There's been other people that I've talked to that have had that same experience. I would love to hear from you down below how that lands in your experience. Until next time, I do hope that you are taking such good care of yourself, the part of yourself that has nothing to do with work or showing up and giving so that you can be worthy of love. And so will I.